They say, advocaterum semilis loqui Latin confudendi impress populi, which loosely translated from Latin means we lawyers love to speak Latin and confuse and impress people. I hope that worked. On that note, I'm sure most of you know of the zodiac sign, the Libra, which is depicted by a set of weighing scales. But what some of you may not know is that Libra is also a Latin word for balance. And as a lawyer, the concept of balance is so important in everything we do. Indeed, the very symbol of law is the scales of justice. So today, for a lawyer to speak on Heiko or balance is perhaps entirely appropriate. When I joined this profession, one of the first things my father, who's also a lawyer, told me, he said, "Son, when you take a man's money, you fight hard for them." Then I joined Chambers and my senior, a wonderful lawyer, told me, "Remember, Rohan, while you fight hard for your client, don't ever compromise your integrity or allow your moral compass to waver." Armed with all of these words of advice, I entered the legal profession. And a few days later, one of the judges, who I'd known since I was a small child, called me into Chambers and said, "Remember, Mr. Kama, you are first and foremost an officer of the court. Forget what your client says, whatever his instructions may be. You owe a duty first and foremost to the court." And so began the next 20 years of my life asking, am I being fair to my client? Am I being fair to the court? What do I do when my client's instructions conflict with my duty to the court? What do I do when my client wants me to do something that conflicts with my own moral compass? So when I was asked to speak on Heiko, I sat down to pen down my thoughts, and it struck me just how important striking the right balance is in the field of law and for a lawyer. On a daily basis, a lawyer asks himself to balance between client and court, what is fair and what is unfair, and between what is just and what is legal. Because very often, what is just may not necessarily be legal, and what is legal is oftentimes not just. Let me give you a few examples from cases that I've actually worked on. We once had a client who walked into my office in an absolute panic because the brother with whom he'd been warring for the last 20 odd years had suddenly changed the locks to his house and had kept him out. His first question to me was, "Can I just break the locks? Can I just walk back in?" Now, of course, that would be eminently fair and perfectly just because his brother had no business locking him out of the house in the first place. But unfortunately, that's not the acceptable legal course. So we advised him, go to the police, file a complaint, show the CCTV footage which shows the brother changing the lock. And fortunately, by exercising the right steps legally, he was able to get back into his house. Then there's the never-ending balance that we have to strike on a day-to-day basis between the duty to walk into court and fight hard for our client, but also the duty to fight fair for the court. We once had this very sweet old Parsi gentleman as a client who, God bless him, used to have the most infuriating habit of coming to us the night before his matter was on board and was reaching for hearing and produce out of his pocket a document which at all times was very crucial and most times was completely fatal to his case. And of course, then there was the last minute mad scramble trying to make sense of the document. But the one thing we always did was we'd always place it before the court. We'd always place that document before the judge and then use our skill, if we could, to try and explain it away. And that's so important because even though the client may ask you to suppress or keep something away, and even if you know your opponent may not actually even have that document, you as an officer of the court owe your duty first and foremost to the court, and it is your duty to place the document before the court and then do what you can within the realm of the law to explain it away. The counter to that is if you don't exercise that right balance, if you don't make that correct decision, what happens is if the court ever finds out that you had this document or if it ever comes to their attention that you as a lawyer knew about this and didn't disclose it, then the faith that the court has in you erodes completely. And once those scales tip against you, it's almost impossible to set them aright. Now, one of the biggest problems we have in our legal profession currently is that there is a breed of lawyers who, unfortunately, try to propagate and extend litigations so that then the client is forced to come to them for longer, and they don't try and actually resolve the matter and settle it for their client. The reason is obvious. Once the cash cow dries up and the client goes away, you don't earn any more money. But that's entirely unfortunate. And to my mind, in this legal profession, one of the most important balances that must be struck is your duty outside the courtroom. It is so important as a lawyer to exercise the balance of doing your job not just in court, not just for your fees, but outside the courtroom to actually buy peace for your client, and peace that is hopefully everlasting. We once had a client who, unfortunately, I do far too much of this work, who was in the throes of a matrimonial dispute with her husband. And this dispute, as is the nature of these disputes, was full of rancor, full of acrimony. The wife, of course, wanted more child support. The husband wanted more custody or more access. And this dispute had been going on for the last 12 years or so before they came to us. There were, believe it or not, over 200 cases and complaints filed between them. Now, at this point, when the matters traveled up to the High Court and came to all of us here, the easy thing to do as a lawyer would have been to go to court, argue the matter, pocket my fees, and go home. But fortunately, on both sides, both sets of lawyers said, enough is enough. This dispute has to end now. And we sat for hours and days. I can't even begin to express how many nights we spent sitting and trying to make our clients see sense. But eventually, we got there. And eventually, this dispute settled. And so my takeaway from that was, it is so important as a lawyer to exercise the balance that sometimes entails not earning that extra fee or not going into court, but entails actually doing your job, which is to resolve matters for your client. But with all of this said, to my mind, the hardest challenge, the ones that I find most difficult to grapple with, have nothing to do with the court or even the client per se. It is those cases where your own morals or your own ethics are called into question. It unfortunately happens far too much in the legal profession, where a client walks in and almost immediately I know he's being dishonest with me. And just a word from the wise, don't lie to your lawyer, because we always know. We always find out. So when I find a client being dishonest with me, or if I feel that he's going to use my advice to either break the law or cheat someone, that's when the real conundrum comes up. And I feel that in those situations, the dilemma and the question one asks yourself, should I even appear for that person? Should I even advise that person? And it is indeed a conundrum. But at the end of the day, there is that little voice in your head that tells you that something's wrong. And my advice to all of you, in any field of life, always listen to that little voice in your head. As a lawyer, I tell myself, drop the client. You won't regret it. No amount of fees, no client is worth compromising your own morals and your own integrity. Now, these decisions are easier to say 20 years on, but they weren't easy decisions. As a young lawyer, when work is hard to come by, clients are few and far between, nobody knows you, nobody wants you, you do feel reluctant to lose a client. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, I realize that it is those decisions taken at a nascent stage in your career that eventually will define who you become as a lawyer. My experience of this profession has been that anybody can become a lawyer. It's really not hard. And any lawyer can go into court and win a matter. But the good lawyers, and indeed the greatest lawyers, are the ones who do it the right way, even if that is the more challenging or more time-consuming path. The question that then remains is, how do I do it the right way? How do I strike the right balance? And the answer is simple. Tell yourself on a day-to-day basis, and this applies in any field, not just law. Tell yourself on a day-to-day basis, I will not cross the line. Tell yourself there is no option but to do the right thing. Remind yourself on a day-to-day basis, it's all right if I lost today, because if I act honestly, I will win many more matters in future than if I don't act honestly. So let me leave you all today with the 3 most crucial elements of balance that I feel are appropriate not just for a lawyer, but in any field of life that you may choose. Balance your ambition for victory, integrity in achieving it. Balance the fear of losing with the knowledge that when you win the correct way, the victory feels that much more sweet. And most important of all, balance your desire for quick success with the patience to achieve it the right way. Thank you very much.